Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining Clifford Chance and the Sapphire Network to celebrate International Lesbian Day, and thank you to our panel of speakers for joining us to share their stories. I would first like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of this land, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. I'm Christie-Lee Malek, and my pronouns are she and her. I'm a lesbian woman and have been working in the legal sector for my entire career. I'm also the proud co-lead of the Arcus Australia network, along with my colleague Nathan Eastwood. Clifford Chance is extremely excited to be bringing this event to you with Pride and Diversity's Sapphire network, whose focus is connecting lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender and queer women and creating greater awareness of the challenges faced by those women. You will hear more about the Sapphire Network a little later on today from Jessica Mayers, who is a relationship manager at Pride and Diversity. Recognising that today is about diversity and inclusion, we're aware that our panel consists of white cisgender lesbian women. Their stories are, in themselves, diverse, as everyone's journey is different. But we'd love to ask that if there are people tuning into this event today that would like to share their stories, please use the chat function and we'll endeavour to share those stories after the event. As well as if you have any questions, please feel free to submit them via the chat function and we'll answer them at the end of the event. Let's begin by addressing the question, why is it so important to have a day dedicated to lesbians? The answer, I feel, is simple. International Lesbian Day commemorates lesbian culture, history, visibility, and champions women. Today's specific focus is celebrating your HerStory. We have an incredible panel of diverse lesbian women who are here to share their personal experiences, including some of the difficulties they've encountered, how they were able to overcome them and succeed in their professions. Our panel today includes Ilse van Gasteren, who is a partner at Clifford Chance in Amsterdam, Tony Nolson, who is a digital innovation lead at Amazon Web Services, and Kim Taylor, who is a specialist scheduler at BHP Billiton. Before I hand over, I would like to share my own personal experience with you all, which may be familiar to some. I come from a large conservative Maltese family and have had to endure many hurdles to confidently be my true authentic self. This has included losing some of my family over my apparent lifestyle choices. School also isn't easiest at the best of times. However, coming out as a lesbian at school when I was 15 did bring a whole new set of challenges. I didn't know any other kids in my grade who had come out. My teachers began to monitor me because, when I would interact with my female friends, such as giving them a cuddle in the playground where other people that was fine to do. At the time, I just didn't understand why this was the case. I was just trying to be my true self, and it seemed that everyone had an issue with what I was doing. Sadly, due to having endured a lot of bullying during my school life, I had to transfer schools in 2010, and I seriously considered concealing my sexuality during this time. However, I decided to be open and honest during my senior years and be my authentic self. Embracing my sexuality saw me from being teased and shunned to then it being sexualized, which was a whole other thing. My girlfriend and I at the time became the talk of the town, and it was then really hot to be a lesbian. It was then a sexual thing. You go on the internet and you type in lesbian, and it was just a sexual thing. But it had nothing to do with anyone else. It was just the way I identified, and I just, again, didn't understand why it had to be an issue. I felt really like I couldn't win, and I'd hoped that after I'd graduated that work life would be different, but it wasn't always the case. At various points during my career, I've endured bullying, harassment, and accusations that have only materialised because I've openly identified as a lesbian woman in the workplace. This has caused me to consider, my career path. Did I choose the right one? Would this have happened in another industry? And at particularly dark moments, considered going back to the closet, if it wasn't going to change. However, I've built myself up so much to know now that on each occasion when this happens, I need to say that I'm a proud lesbian woman and I'm entitled to be this. I've persevered in the workplace by being the co-lead of Arcus Australia, and essentially just keeping my head down and striving for equality for people in the workplace. It's so important. Over the past several years, I've grown as a person, and I'm now not afraid anymore to defend myself and proceed through the relevant channels to have instances of homophobia and bullying investigated, and to stand up for other lesbian women or those from the LGBTQ+ community who may have gone through similar instances of homophobia and bullying in the workplace. Taking on the role as co-lead of Arcus Australia, of which I'm incredibly proud to be doing so, has ensured that I'm taking my negative experiences and proactively educating, raising awareness, and ensuring that Clifford Chance is a safe space for anyone that identifies. One of the most challenging things that I've found during my legal career is that I haven't met many identifying lesbian women. And this has left me feeling quite isolated and vulnerable and just a bit lost. Having a role model who identified, I feel, would have helped me through, those years of, bullying and accusations. For example, having an event like this one today, which is incredible to be running, let alone, participating in when Pride and Diversity host Sapphire events, would have been hugely beneficial to me. And I do hope that by sharing our stories today with you all, that it can encourage women and others to be their true selves at work and in life. As well, there have been a few key initiatives that I was personally proud to see happen at Clifford Chance over the last year. One of which is having a dedicated LGBTQ+ grievance officer who is able to help with any issues or problems that may be encountered by LGBTQ+ employees, as well as updating our anti-bullying and harassment policies to reflect examples of specific LGBTQ+ bullying. To make sure that if any of these things happen, that they are, able to be resolved and, considered as something that's very serious and very important. Overall, since coming out in high school, I feel like I have come a long way in feeling secure and confident in my own skin, one of which is sitting in front of you all, and telling my story to you all. I'm really, really happy to say that, I've gone through life and I'm now married, to a woman. Wow, thinking about myself in high school, I would never have dreamed that I would have married a woman, but I did it. But yeah, I'm so incredibly happy that I can be myself at Clifford Chance every single day, and it is just incredible. I'm just so supported and so loved here and embraced by everyone, not that anyone can see, but in this room was a huge amount of people. So I'm very grateful for that opportunity. I'm just so thankful. And that was basically my story. I'd really like to pass you on now to Jessica Mayers, who is a relationship manager at Pride and Diversity. Jess, can you hear me?
I can, and thank you for that. Thanks for sharing. It's always a big step to get out there and share your story. So thank you for that. And before we get started, I just wanted to let you know my son is home from daycare, and so if you hear somebody screaming, it's because I have a 2-year-old here who thinks he can cook his own dinner. So just letting you know, that's what it is. Nobody's dying. I'm just going to share my screen because I just do have a PowerPoint to share with you. And so can you all see my PowerPoint deck now? Yes, great. All right, so before we get started, I would also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we are all dialing in from and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. The history of International Lesbian Day is a little bit ambiguous. So there is no clear consensus on when the day first started to be recognised. Some accounts state it started when a march was held in New Zealand in 1980. So a group of about 40 lesbians, some anonymously wearing purple veils, marched through Wellington Park on International Women's Day. And this is the account that is supported by the Queer History Project as the start of International Women's Day. Other accounts consider the day to have started in the 1990s, but whenever it did start, what is clear is that the 8th of October was eventually settled on because it is 6 months after International Women's Day. International Lesbian Day aims to celebrate the diversity and the lived experiences of people in the lesbian community each year, while also highlighting the importance of visibility and discussing the issues that lesbians still face because of their sexuality. While being a lesbian was never officially criminalised, unlike homosexual activity between men, lesbians have still faced homophobia and discrimination based on their sexuality. Unfortunately, it's hard to trace a lot of the history of lesbians because, like with all history about women, it is erased, non-existent, or centred around the male perception and gaze. We have been largely ignored or stigmatised in the law, in wider society, and in the media. Even today, the word lesbian is still heavily stigmatised in a way that the word gay is not. In 2016 and 2017, 2 studies out of the US showed that 96% of top 100 movies made in the past 100 years were directed by men, while almost 80% of showrunners for new scripted shows were men. The result is 2 lesbian stereotypes becoming visible in movies and television. That of the over-sexualized, two-dimensional woman who serves only to satisfy the fantasy of a man, and that of the bland, largely disinteresting woman who serves just as hollow a purpose. The former is a projection of the only way a lesbian can serve in a meaningful way to a straight man, and the latter is the reaction to a woman being completely uninterested in a man sexually by making her as boring and unimportant to the plot as possible. Added to the stigma we see reflected back to us in the media is the complexity of the double glazed ceiling. For those that may already be experiencing discrimination and barriers because they are a woman, it may be too hard to also ask them to stand up as a woman with a diverse sexuality and so experience additional hurdles. The 2020 AWEI employee survey once again shows that LGBTQ women are less likely than GBTQ men to be out at work in regards to their sexual orientation, and when they are out, are less likely to feel comfortable being out amongst their colleagues. From both our survey and reports and surveys out of the US and the UK, comments from LGBTQ women participants indicate there are many reasons keeping them from feeling comfortable coming out. These include the impact being out could have on the team and the fear of being alienated by them after coming out, concerns about who is in charge and their perceptions around sexuality and gender diverse women, as companies are largely run by middle-aged straight men and they are the ones to decide on promotions and career progressions, it is easier and safer to be partially or fully closeted. Assumptions on the gender of partners and personal questions that force you to either come out or lie. Bullying and harassment, which can be gendered, sexuality-based, or both, again highlighting the effect of the dual minority status. Those that were out to colleagues and then were the subject of jokes or comments frequently brush them off so as not to cause a scene or become known as the angry lesbian. Not feeling welcome or included in women's network groups. Anecdotally, there is a lot of feedback that LGBTQ women value the knowledge and networking opportunities that can be gained by being a part of the women's network. However, they often don't feel inclusive, catering especially to a very heteronormative image of femininity and how a woman should look and act. One of the themes that came out of the original Pride and Diversity PwC Where Are All the Women report and continues to be echoed in our employee survey data is the lack of visible LGBTQ women role models in organisations, and that this affects the likelihood of someone coming out and their confidence around being out and feeling safe. The 2020 survey data shows us that 79% of LGBTQ women believe it's important to have an LGBTQ woman as a role model, but only 45% have a visible LGBTQ role model in their organisation. For women that are also LGBTQ, having visible role models can assist in figuring out where you fit in the company and company culture and show how you can advance your career. A lack of visibility leads to women feeling discouraged about their future and the likelihood of them being able to advance and be out while they advance. The common theme seems to be that more visibly out, sexuality and gender diverse women in senior leadership roles is needed to ensure cultural change. And so, as we get ready to hear from our amazing speakers, I would like to encourage everybody on the call tonight to take some advice from ACON women and to be fearless, to be bold. You don't know who may be looking for a role model. You don't know whose life you may have an impact on. You don't know who may be there just waiting for someone like them to stand up and be visible.
Amazing. Thank you, Jess, for that history of International Lesbian Day. That was super informative, and I definitely learned a few things. Passing on now to Ilse van Gasteren, who is a partner from our Amsterdam office. Ilse, are you there? Good morning.
Good morning. Yes, I'm here. Hi. Thank you. I'm very happy to be here and part of the panel, and thank you, Christie-Lee, for sharing such a personal story with the audience, which already shows the importance of this event being organized. And also happy to share with you my story, which is a bit different, I must say. So I'm Ilse van Gasteren. I'm 43 years old and I'm a lawyer. My expertise is in insolvency and restructuring, and I'm a partner in the Amsterdam office of Clifford. I do not live in Amsterdam. My home is in Haarlem, which is 20 minutes commute from Amsterdam and closer to the sea. And I live there together with my wife, Elizabeth, and we have a son, Floris, and a daughter, Kate. My LGBT struggles and coming out are, as I would call the maybe classic story, or maybe the preferred story of being very afraid of coming out for years, but feeling also very lucky looking back to realize that it wasn't so bad after all. And to share my story, we need to go back about 25 years when I was a student in Groningen. So I studied in the north of the country, Groningen. Very difficult to pronounce for non-Dutch people. But that's not in Amsterdam. At the time, Amsterdam was known to be very, very progressive and very gay-friendly. Groningen was less so, but still a city in the Netherlands, so it was okay-ish. But I had no confidence whatsoever to share the fact that I already knew deep down that I was gay. So I spent my entire university time being in the closet, being afraid of sharing the news, being afraid of losing my friends, being afraid of disappointing my family. And I wasn't, there were no role models for me there. So there no one in my community when I studied was gay, was openly gay. Later on in the period, I wasn't the only one, of course, but by that time, people just didn't come out. And people would also make jokes about, oh, I hope you're not a lesbian, things like that. It wasn't bullying or anything like that. And it couldn't be because I wasn't out. And looking back, I had a great time. And I would do it again, I would say, because I made friends for life and I had the greatest time as a student. But I still regret the fact that I had that secret and never shared it. But after my studies, I thought I need to be myself and I need to find a way to be myself in the next step of my life. So I managed to get a traineeship in New York at a local law firm because I thought New York is the gay capital of the world at that time. If I go to New York, I can be myself. And I went, and it was excellent. I loved New York. It was quite scary to be there by myself for the first few days. And I was very lonely. And what happened, I contacted my friends in Groningen to tell them I was very lonely. And they hooked me up with their friends. So in no time, again, I was in that community that knew me, that had connections with my community at home. Which meant that I had a great time in New York, and I still don't regret it, but I couldn't be myself because I continued to be afraid. And the weird thing was that my internship was then extended, and they asked me to go to the Dutch Antilles, to Curaçao, which is the Caribbean. And then you would think, oh, you're an ex-student, almost starting to work. You should go to the Caribbean. It's a great offer to also be there for a few months. But I was afraid because I knew or thought that the Caribbean was a very closed community, that people would not be open to any people coming out being gay. And I thought, is it smart to go there for me? Because it's the time of my life to come out. But the beach and the beautiful life at Curaçao was tempting enough. So I decided to go, and it was one of the most important decisions in my life looking back, because I came there and it turned out that it was an extremely open community. I made friends, a lot of friends, and there were gay people, and I made the first gay friends in my life. So everything changed then. I got much more confident. I also met my wife, Elizabeth, there. We didn't get together until later, but we met there. And having friends being gay gave me the confidence of coming out. I didn't yet. So then the next move was to start finding a job. And I applied to law firms in Amsterdam. And then the decision was, which law firm will I choose? And where, again, the question, where can I be my true self? Also because when you start as a lawyer, you will be there for a couple of years, at least. So if you don't start in the right way, I knew it would be too scary for me to come out again. And I still don't know exactly how I found out, because it's 20 years ago and there was hardly internet and no social media. But there came a point when I found out that Clifford Chance in Amsterdam had amongst its 20 partners, 2 gay partners. And when I discovered that, and of course, next to the other items of being interested in a type of law firm as Clifford Chance, I thought there's no way whatsoever I can't be out and I can't be myself, is that if that firm has 2 gay partners. So that was one of the most important reasons for choosing for Clifford Chance, and I never regretted it, because I've always been able to be myself. I have not. I'm very happy, and I know I'm lucky to not have been bullied whatsoever. I think there's a benefit in working in Amsterdam, of course. The biggest issues I had was that I heard that a colleague behind my back was calling me the lesbian. Or there was an interesting event when a senior partner, and he has retired already, but he proudly told me that when they were discussing my promotion to associate, he told the group, we would be stupid not to promote Ilse as becoming an associate, because she will not be going on maternity leave. Well, too bad for him. I went twice, and also it wasn't very inclusive. I also went to London on secondment. Then again, I had to test whether I could be myself. I was a bit young and I didn't know the London office very well. But also there, they were so inclusive. And the only encounter I had was that one of the partners asked me, what is your husband doing? Because we went there together. So I told him, well, my girlfriend, I used the word girlfriend at the time still, my girlfriend is studying at the university here in London. And he was so shocked and he was embarrassed and he was worried that he made a mistake. And of course, that wasn't the case. So he became one of my best friends within the firm. So having that as a summary of what happened, I think, again, I've been very, very lucky being with Clifford Chance, and potentially that's also the reason why I stayed for so long, because I'm still there. After 10 years with Clifford Chance, my daughter was born and I took the counsel role. So normally you can also try to become a partner, but I decided not to. I couldn't be a good partner, spend all my time on the partnership and spend the time I wanted on my kids. So I started working part-time, and I've done that for 7 years. In that time, also my son Floris was born. So my career path is a bit different from others, from my male colleagues specifically, because I stayed counsel until I worked 16, 17 years for Clifford Chance. And when Kate and Floris went to school, I sort of came to life again, and I felt the energy of taking my career to the next level. And I had been lucky that the financial crisis in 2009 helped me building a practice whilst I was a counsel and working part-time, but it had been quite successful. So I became a partner in 2018, and I've been looking back, if you asked me that in 2010, I would have said, no way, I won't be a partner. I have no role models. So few female partners in Amsterdam, but also in many other countries, unfortunately. It is changing, but at that time it wasn't really tempting, to be honest. But I'm still very proud now that I've made that achievement, and it also made me realize that being a partner makes me more of a role model to young students who want to become a lawyer, or to anyone who wants to join a law firm like mine, like Clifford Chance. But are afraid of exactly what I had. Can I be myself within that firm? So that's why I am taking the stage more since I'm a partner. I feel that responsibility, and also very much like doing it and hear other stories. And therefore, I would also very much like to thank Christie-Lee and Sarah of the CC Australia team to inviting me for this panel. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Ilse. It was really nice to hear your story, and thank you for sharing that with us and being awake at the early hours of the morning from Amsterdam. We'll next pass on to Tony Nelson, who is a digital innovation lead at Amazon Web Services. Tony?
Thanks, Christie-Lee. I have never done this before, and so I've done a lot of speaking. It's kind of my day job, but I have never told this story before, and it makes me nervous and uncomfortable because if I think about the stories in this space, I either feel like a fraud or that I'm ignorant, and those things will make sense to you soon. But to give you a bit of context, I was a really problematic child. So growing up, I was an absolute provocateur. I was antagonistic. I was a troublemaker. I would disrupt whatever was available just for the sheer joy of disrupting it. I was like that at school. And so I guess innate in that is not really responding to how people criticize you. I felt very self-assured that I knew who I was and it wasn't anybody else's business to have an opinion on me at a very young age. That was obviously a problem for my parents, which, again, sort of didn't bother me. I was just very independent. And so because of that, I was just comfortable with who I was. And I remember a point, I had my first girlfriend, I think, straight in first year of university. I mean, actually before that, I said that it was to raise money for cancer, which it was. It was in a shopping centre raising money for cancer, but partially it was just to annoy my mother. So I think coming out would have been the least of their worries about me. Survival would have been a bigger concern. So I remember a friend of mine an old friend from school saying, I've met someone that you'll like. And I was like, great, fantastic. And I waltzed straight over to Hungry Jack's. And I asked her out, and that was kind of the beginning. So, I didn't notice. It's possible I didn't notice, but I am more and more conscious that I am in a absolute minority in that space. And so I also, didn't feel the need to identify with my sexuality necessarily. It wasn't my identity. And so if I think about some of the challenges so I'm a bit calmer now, just rest assured, I'm less of a problem child. But I still like to agitate for change for sure, and hopefully be more constructive in that space. But I didn't really have to try and be thoughtful about anything until I met my now wife. So cheers to all the ladies who are married. I got married this year in COVID after 4 false starts. So it was a very small elopement. So we're hoping to do something bigger. But I knew that the one person that would have a problem with it, actually, I knew that the friction I would come up against would be my mother. And so I just thought I would talk her through it. And so I had to approach that issue, and I took that I knew I was serious about this girl, and so I kind of took that opportunity to take the pain up front. And it was really difficult, and it's not still difficult, but I still recall the pain at that time. So I think it's interesting how the person that I would have said that I didn't care for their opinion in the beginning, it was important to me that I had that conversation. Although even when it was difficult with her, I didn't let it get to me because I was still very comfortable with my choices. So I always worked for very progressive businesses, and I always, because of my nature, moved to or aligned with people who were more similar to me. I wasn't aware of any discrimination from, and I worked in a very male industry, tech, but I either wasn't aware of it or I probably didn't care. And so I live in a bubble, and I'll get to that in a minute. My wife is also quite private. I feel like I'm very public, I'm very, very happy to talk about what I feel about things. She was quite private, interestingly, but grew up in a very public and open space, because she played football for Australia, so she was a Matilda for years, and her sexuality was completely normalised in that time, but she didn't want to share it. She had with a partner at a time that she didn't really want to, but she would have preferred to keep it private. And I found that kind of strange when we met, because I was so open with kind of being me. And so two humans coming together is an interesting. Have evolved over time in that space as well. Just because I have a difficult experience for whatever reason, attitude could be some of them, it doesn't mean other people didn't. And it's the definition of privilege to tell someone whether they should or shouldn't be offended, or how they should feel when you didn't feel or you weren't exposed to that thing. And I'm very conscious of that. And so because of that, there was kind of a moment where I guess I realised that I was going to have to come out, and not just have it be my own lack of caring anymore. And so this is kind of a step in that journey. But that only really happened last year when we got engaged. And she posted our engagement on Twitter, and she did it not to boast, but to try and normalise for kids or anyone who might feel uncomfortable. So I guess I've taken that on board, and I do notice more now. I went to a McKinsey leadership course a couple of years ago, and it was for LGBT leaders, and there were 2 lesbians, and out of a class of 50. So I'm like, oh, that looks like every kind of gender spectrum too, but I wasn't expecting that here. I'm like, well, there's not less of us, so why are we less represented? Why do we feel less comfortable being out? And that's my experience. That doesn't mean that it's not going to be somebody else's experience. After we got engaged, I decided to do something public. I'm quite open at work, and I do a lot of public speaking, and so I was talking about a variety of things, an innovation initiative I was working on, and gender, particularly a gender balance at work. And I decided to out our engagement at every functional meeting that I had, so now everyone knows. They're not feeling comfortable. Being visible would make them feel more comfortable. Another senior leader, joined our leadership team. That made me feel even more comfortable, which was kind of cool, but I probably didn't notice that was missing. And then just recently, I've been asked, and this is really controversial, so I don't know, I would hope that this is kept in confidence, but I've been asked to join a board of a school, and it was the school that I went to, and they've just been in a lot of trouble in the media for teaching a variety of things. But one of the issues that was surfaced was that the religious curriculum had a book that condemned homosexuality, but also suggested that female victims of sexual violence bring it upon themselves. And after all of this kind of consideration, I have to think. I live in a bubble, and I live in an extreme bubble. I live in the eastern suburbs of Sydney, and I live in a bubble at work. And it's an old religious school. And I had to think whether this is my fight. Is this I don't have kids that go to that school. And I have decided, I did my due diligence, and I've walked carefully through the space, and I'm going to step up and make some pretty serious suggestions about the things that they need to do. There's obviously been a lot of people who have left. And interestingly, when Sarah pushed me on it, she said to me, when I was considering taking the role, and obviously all of the drama has kind of already happened, she said, how would you explain yourself to the lesbian community? And I was like, oh, there's a lesbian community? And then I was like, actually, yes, how would I explain myself? So that's my bar now. And that's where the bar is set. How do I make sure that I'm not just using my own experience as a dimension of how I think I should act? So now I want to be more gay. Let's all be better lesbians. I would like to be more gay. Can I be more gay? So, with that, I would say that my mum has come on a journey and is in a pretty good place. But one of the biggest factors in that was us getting married. Not only were grown up with, oh God, I'm getting emotional, thrilled, like totally out of the world thrilled. The love that we received and they rallied around her was incredible. And maybe that was part of her journey. Maybe seeing, I'm not encouraging everyone to get married, because you should probably, do it with the right person. But it's a really important moment for the people in your life who might be struggling to be as far in that acceptance as you are. And for my mum, it was really important. And so finally, while I have no concerns about work or, who might judge me, because that is still, I am acutely aware of role modelling for people who don't have the experience that I have. And so thank you very much. Let's all be more gay.
Oh my God, Tony, I could not agree with you more. Just on a side note, I won part of my wedding off the radio and they asked me, oh, are you gay? And I said, I'm a big homosexual, like, give me the wedding. So that got me on the air. And, you have to, you just need to be visible. Just be out, be proud. Whoever judges you, they are not worth your time. Just be yourself. It's the most important thing. But thank you so much, Tony, for sharing that with us. I will also now pass on to Kim Taylor from BHP, who is a specialist scheduler. Kim, welcome.
Christie-Lee, thanks everyone for the stories so far. And yeah, great to see some familiar faces on here. Hi, Laura. And some of you, if you went to the Pride and Diversity conference last year, you may have already heard part of my story, but here we are, it's back by popular demand. So I do work for BHP in maintenance, planning and scheduling, and I, at the moment, I very proudly represent the L in the LGBT. I am one of the co-leads of BHP's LGBT plus ally network, JASPA. But that being a proud lesbian isn't something that has been a constant in my life. It hasn't always been there. So the penny didn't drop for me that I was a lesbian until I was about 25. So some people think that's early, other people think it's really late. The benefit of that for me is I didn't have to go through the childhood stress of worrying about whether I was going to be accepted by my family, whether I was going to be kicked out of home. I was already, well established as an adult. I was living overseas. I was really lucky to have a career in the arts for about 10 years, from the age of about 20 to 30. And in the arts, I definitely was not the only gay in the village. The arts is, absolutely embraces diversity. That's what makes that industry thrive. So, yeah, I really didn't have to think twice about being gay. I fit right in. It wasn't a big deal to anyone around me, and it really wasn't a huge deal to me at the time either. And after that career came to a close, I worked in the airline industry for about 5 years. And again, I really didn't think about the fact that I was gay. Again, the airline industry is really diverse. I was not the only gay in the village. When I look back, yeah, I probably was one of the very few lesbians I knew. There was probably more gay men than gay women out at work, but I still felt really, really safe there to be myself. So the first time that all changed for me was when I joined mining. So I'd reached sort of just a bit of a dead end where I was in airline operations, and BHP were advertising for their new remote ops control centre. They were centralising their all of their coal mining was going to be centralised in a big control room in Brisbane. So they put out a massive recruitment campaign. I thought, I'll just throw my hat in the ring, I'll give it a go, and lo and behold, I got the job. And it was a Brisbane-based job, and I was out in my interview because we had a discussion about training, and I was going to have to go out to some of the mine sites for my training, and my partner was away in the Navy at the time. And I remember saying, yeah, I think I can do this training. Just my girlfriend's away. I'm just not sure how I'm going to look after my 2 fur babies while I'm traveling for this training. So I was still out. I still wasn't really thinking much about it until it was time to put on that high-vis uniform and get on the plane up to Mackay. And I just thought, mining, small town, this is not going to be a gay-friendly environment. So I just thought, for these few months while I'm training, it really will be best to just leave all that gay at the door in the city. And I also thought it wouldn't be hard to leave it behind. I just thought, I'm only going to be there for a few months. I'm not really going to make any friends. It'll be easy. But I was so wrong. I had completely underestimated small towns. Everyone wants to know you. I had completely underestimated the friendly family feel at BHP. Everyone's like family. Everyone wants to know everything about you. So I had been on the job for about 4 hours, and we were off to the crib room for our first morning tea break, and it was time to get to know Kim around the lunch table. And the first question was, wow, so you're from the city, you live in Brisbane, you know, you're going to be operating this brand new control room, you must live in the city, you must like the city. I said, yeah. And second question was, oh, and who do you live with there? Have you got a husband or a partner or something? I said, yes, yep, I do. And one of the guys said, oh, and what does he do? And I said, oh, he is in the Navy. And so there we go. I had my first lie. I now had an imaginary boyfriend, and I had to name him. Sorry, that's my dog in the background. So my partner's name at the time was Taryn. So I thought, okay, I'll call him Darren. That way, if I accidentally slip up one day, I'm on night shift, I get tired and I say Taryn, the guys will just think that they heard Darren. So from there, I went into complete avoidance. I was kind of meant to be up there, sort of getting to know people, getting to know the job, and instead I just avoided everyone at all costs. I didn't want anyone asking me any questions. I would try and have answers ready if I was going to be going on days off because we're on a roster. You know, I'd have the answers ready. You know, when are you seeing your Navy boy again? Have you spoken to Darren lately? I had a picture of Darren on my phone just in case. I was completely terrified that one of the guys would find me on Facebook. Sorry. I was completely terrified that one of the guys might find me on Facebook and realise that, you know, Darren wasn't in any of my profile pictures. So, you know, it was a really, really terrifying time. Sort of lost my train of thought a bit. But, okay, thanks, buddy. So anyway, and I was the only girl on site when I first got there. You know, BHP were quite early in their inclusion and diversity journey. I was the only girl on the site, so I was just completely terrified. Anyway, training finally ended. I got through it and I went back to Brisbane and I had Taryn again. The job involved a bit of back and forth, travelling back to site. So when I'd go to site, I had Darren, and when I went back to Brisbane, I had Taryn. So, of course, eventually I got outed. It was a complete accident by one of my younger Brisbane colleagues, and he felt absolutely terrible. And, yeah, you know, just one of the most terrifying moments of my life. And, you know, I eventually had to go back up to site and face my lies. And that was really, really hard. And it wasn't just hard on me, it was hard on the guys out there as well, because they're just absolutely lovely. They became like a second family to me when I was up there away from home, and they just thought, wow, did you really think you couldn't tell us? Did you really think we would care? You know, so yeah, for me, as it turned out, you know, I'm sure the bullying and harassment still exists, sadly. It isn't just in mine, it can happen in any industry. But for me, it wasn't the fact that I was gay or that I was a lesbian that was a problem. The problem was me, that I just didn't feel safe to come out. It was the ideas in my head that I wouldn't be accepted, and how my personality just completely changed when I felt like I had to hide. So yeah, that's my story. You know, I'm lucky that I haven't experienced that bullying and harassment for being a lesbian. It was all created in my own head.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing, Kim. That was incredible. Thank you to everyone who has shared their stories today. It has been an eye-opener and just amazing to hear so many different experiences because, yeah, everyone's story is different. And across the world, even with Ilse's story, it's just amazing to hear how a lesbian is perceived and how it is working as a lesbian in the workplace and how different experiences we all have. So thank you to you all. I first wanted to ask, I've got some people in front of me here, if anyone had a question for any of our panel today, to open up the floor. Anyone that might be here? Fabulous. Nate?
Thanks, Christie-Lee. That was really interesting, and thanks to all the speakers. I identify as a gay man, and I'm sure there's plenty of allies here in the office that identify as allies. How can we in the LGBT community or as allies support those in the office who identify as a lesbian?
I think just coming from my own personal experience, it would be that, you know, I'm the only gay in the village. So giving me a platform and being able to be visible to anyone that may come through the door, that, you know, Clifford Chance is a welcoming space, and that if you maybe don't want to out yourself, if you feel comfortable coming to me as a lesbian, as a role model, essentially, that, you know, making lesbian women role models in your organization, giving them a platform to share the stories just like today, and just being visible. Visibility is the most important thing that you could ever, you know, gift upon someone, especially someone who, you know, may not have others that they identify with in the office. Like, of course, I'll identify with a gay man because we're in the acronym under the same umbrella, but you know, if there is no one that identifies as a lesbian, it's a bit difficult. But as I said in my speech, just having Ilse there in Amsterdam is just, and a partner at that, is so amazing to see and to have as a role model. So yeah, beautiful. Any other questions around? Fab?
I have a question. In terms of, for the panel, whether there's any policies or procedures that have helped over the time to allow lesbians to be more visible or feel more visible, if there's anything workplaces have done specifically to assist with that?
Did you hear that, panel?
I'll jump in there because I'll just plus one to the because I'm not a lawyer and also not deep in construction of policy, but I have realised in the last 2 months of going through this board process, it can be quite powerful. So I think it's something that I think I would say that all organisations are on a journey with that, and I would be fascinated to know from anyone in the chat as well, if you know of any businesses that do this really well from a policy perspective. Is there any best practice?
So I'll touch on policy, I guess, because that's a lot of what we do with our members is looking at their policy. And it's not really anything that I would call out specifically for lesbian inclusion, but just LGBTQ inclusion is in general. There's a lot of things that organisations can be looking at. So are you still, for example, in your parental policy, are you still using gendered language? Are you still talking about a woman or a mother going on maternity leave? Or are you talking about two partners that one of them might take parental leave? When you're looking at your benefits, is it still, if a husband works at your organisation, the wife can get this? Or is it removing that gendered language to make it clear that if there is an employee and they have a partner, that partner is entitled, or their family, however they made them, because LGBTQ families are made in lots of different ways. It's not just a man and a woman and the woman will have the baby. There's lots of different ways that we make families. And so making it clear that no matter how you make your family, it's included. When it comes to bullying and harassment, there are specific issues that face the LGBTQ community. Part of it is around disclosure. You may not be out, but you may be experiencing bullying or harassment related to being LGBTQ. And so is there an easy way for somebody to report something? And so if there's not, that means that they're not going to report it. There's lots of different things that you can be looking at in your policy. Most of it is around language, inclusive language, making sure that it's not gendered, and identifying particular roadblocks to different parts of the community and how we can remove those roadblocks.
Yeah. But for me, my experience is with Clifford Chance, we've had policies for a long time. and there has, of course, periodically been more emphasis on the policies. But what worked best and what I'm very proud of is that our firm 2 years ago created a role, a global director of inclusion who is close and in the management of our firm globally. Tiernan, he's also on this call. Thank you for joining, Tiernan. I think that is a signal to all people that the policies are not just policies, that we just need to live by them, and you need to have a champion and an advocate pushing people to actually look at those and putting those to practice.
Amazing.
I saw one of the comments there that sort of said, policies are all very well if they're not sort of implemented in the microculture. I mean, I guess one of the things that I would love to sort of get some insights from is actually at the recruitment stage. What is it that we as an employer can do to make people comfortable about the whole interview process or recruitment process on the way in, so that they feel as though they can be themselves? Because that's almost like that's the first point of contact, as it were. I mean, sure, there's we can make lots of publicity about how diverse we are and how inclusive we are, but that's really when the rubber hits the road, is that it's sort of somebody actually having the courage to put in the in the job, sort of the job application, and feel as though they can actually turn up at that job interview being themselves. So is there anything that the panel could add there? Almost just some concrete things that we could do, or even people in the audience.
One thing that I, Richard, and thank you for saying that, is I'm so grateful to see almost everyone wearing rainbow lanyards in the office. And I've seen, senior associates counsel walk into graduate interviews with pins on, with lanyards on. And I've heard from a couple of experiences that people have said, what are you wearing that for? Or, oh, wow, I can now out myself in the interview as such. And I think that's very powerful, just to have these pins. Like, when an identifying member sees these pins, it means the world to them. And even, for example, in our reception area, we have our gold status AWEI award, which is, I know if I was coming in, as soon as I seen that, I would just be like, wow, I'm comfortable, I'm ready for this job. But yeah, totally open to the panel as to your view as well, what could help get more identifying members comfortable and, welcome in workplaces.
Well, it really starts from the first time somebody logs onto your recruitment page. So do you have an inclusive statement on there? And especially when it comes to trans and gender diverse people, there are roadblocks that will exist for them that won't exist for the rest of the community. And so do you have a contact person that they could get in touch with, especially when it comes to ID? There's lots of questions around ID. If somebody's ID doesn't match their affirmed gender identity, that's going to create a big roadblock, create a lot of anxiety and stress. So is there something explicit on your recruitment page that makes it really clear that you're LGBTQ inclusive and that trans and gender diverse applicants are welcome to apply, and there's somebody for them to contact if they have questions? When they come into the building, we've already touched on it, the importance of visible signs of inclusion. Is there something around that shows you're an inclusive workplace? Not that I want to talk for Kim, but if she had seen some visible signs of inclusion when she had first gone out to that site, could her story have been different? Would she have felt empowered to talk about the fact that she's got a girlfriend and not a boyfriend? If we don't see signs that show it's safe, we're going to assume that it's not. And your recruiters, are they across LGBTQ specific issues? And if they're not, get them trained up. And what about your imagery and the language that you're using in your ads? Is it still very gendered? Is it still very specific to cis, hetero, white people? And so people that fall outside that bracket aren't going to apply because they assume it's not for them.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Perfect. We've got a question directed for Kim coming through in the chat. Kim, if you were put in the same situation now in a new workplace, do you think you'd be openly out from the beginning?
I'd love to say yes, but it just depends on the situation. I mean, everyone who's gay knows that coming out never stops. You're faced with it constantly. If I'm just getting in a taxi and the taxi driver wants to know something about my husband, I probably just roll with that because I'm never going to see him again, and I don't feel like it's my job to to change the world. And the same thing at work. If I'm just going to a mine site for one day or for a couple of hours, I'm maybe not going to put myself through the exhaustion of the whole outing process and all the questions that come with it when I'm never going to see that person again. But yeah, next time, if I was going to be staying somewhere for a few months, if I didn't feel safe enough to come out straight away in the first 4 hours and there were none of those visible cues that Jess just talked about, maybe I wouldn't, but the thing I would do differently is I would correct it sooner. I would very, very quickly in those first couple of weeks make a friend, find an ally, someone I knew who had my back, and next time the conversation was about my boyfriend, I'd say, oh, remember that time you assumed my partner was a he? It's actually a she, and move on, because going through the lies and making up stories and the fear of being outed was just had too much of an effect on not just me and my mental health, but my team members and the business.
Fabulous. Excellent. Well, I would love to thank you all again, and for everyone attending this call. It has been incredible to hear everyone's stories, and Jess as well for sharing the history of International Lesbian Day. I'm so appreciative to be surrounded by such strong and supportive colleagues, friends, and family. And yeah, just love to say thank you to you all. So thanks. Thank you.